Tonight, lying in state. The Queen's coffin now lies in the historic Westminster Hall as she is handed into the care of the nation.
Also making the headlines, the capital's pride. Praise for Edinburgh for the dignity of the Queen's Scottish farewell. And a very special delivery. The Edinburgh schoolchildren who received one of the Queen's last letters.
This is the STV News at 6. Good evening. The Queen is now lying in state in Westminster Hall. The public vigil that was held in Scotland will be repeated in London over the next 4 days before her funeral on Monday. The King led the royal family, including Prince William and Harry, as they walked behind the coffin, which was borne on a gun carriage past the thousands of people who lined the route. Tonight we will be in London for the day's developments and in Edinburgh for the city's return to normal after the events of recent days. But first, our chief reporter Sharon Frew has the story of another day of memorable images.
Leaving Buckingham Palace for the final time. Next to the crown, the wreath on top of the Queen's coffin included pine from the gardens of her beloved Balmoral, where this last great journey began. A gun carriage that had carried the coffins of her mother and father was used to take the late monarch to Westminster Hall. Following behind on foot, the King, his siblings and the Queen's grandsons, a family's grief shared with the world. The bells of Big Ben and guns sounded every minute the procession made its way down the Mall. These streets have witnessed many celebrations over the 7 decades of the Queen's reign, from the coronation to her Platinum Jubilee. This solemn march left some weeping. Once the band stopped, there was a ripple of applause. The crowds then fell silent as the coffin was carried into Westminster Hall. This is where the Queen will lie in state, with politicians including the Prime Minister and the First Minister watching on. A tap of a sword on the ground marked the start of the vigil.
You know, grief is something that comes to us all, and we're aware of that. And it's like losing somebody who's a member of our own family. That's how it feels to me anyway. And I'm sure that's how it feels to a lot of people. Somebody who's just always been there. And I suppose it's when they've gone that you just realise how important they were to you.
As they did in Edinburgh, people are lining up to pay their respects in person. But in London, they predict 10-mile queues may be possible. A huge policing operation and an army of stewards, volunteers and ambulance staff have been drafted in to help the thousands expected to brave the conditions on the banks of the Thames. Among those in the queue is a former member of the Balmoral Guard.
Well, she was our Colonel-in-Chief, so it's in part duty. But having spent time with her and seen quite how much work she did on our behalf, us as a nation, because although it's their holiday retreat, it seemed to me the Queen was working all the time. I want to come and say thank you. I want to say thank you to her.
This evening, mourners began to slowly file into the hall, pausing to say their own personal goodbyes. Sharon Frew, STV News.
We saw the queues in Edinburgh yesterday, and today the queue to see the Queen lying in state in London stretches along the River Thames. We're live now to our Westminster correspondent Catherine Sampson, who has spent the day speaking to people there. And Catherine, people are prepared to wait a long time.
Yes, absolutely. Overnight, if that's what it takes. And what you see behind me here is just a fraction of the queue, which stretches nearly 10 miles snaking through London. Now, at this point, people show their wristbands. They cross over the River Thames towards the Houses of Parliament, towards Westminster Hall, where the Queen lies in state. And in this queue today, I've spoken to some Scots who say they jumped on early trains this morning to come down and be here. I've spoken to other Scots who now live in London or the south of England, who say they've been watching, commemorations back home in the past few days and wanted to be here for this moment in history.
She's done a marvellous job and worked so hard over 70 years. I thought the least I can do is come here today and spend one day queuing. It's nothing, is it really, compared to 70 years. And I was so pleased to be able to bring this flag, which my grandfather bought for the Queen's coronation.
From the 1950s, this flag?
Yes, and it's seen some adventures. There's a few holes in it and a few bits of stitchings, but I love it anyway.
How do you think it'll feel when you finally reach the end of this queue and you sort of be able to say goodbye to the Queen?
Well, I almost wish that moment won't come, but the inevitable has happened and she has died. And I suppose saying goodbye to her, seeing her lying in state will be that final moment.
People are not enjoying, but they're reflecting, I think, is a word, of what is happening. It's a page in history that will take a very long time to repeat. And even though it is sadness, we have many happy memories. The memories will stay on.
Very special atmosphere here tonight, and it struck me how many of us have thought about our own grandparents or great-grandparents and what their relationship has been with the Queen. In terms of this queue, well, it'll continue through the next few days. The Queen will lie in state until 6:30 a.m. on the morning of her funeral. That is Monday morning. Just think how many more hundreds and thousands of people will pass through here to say their final goodbye.
Catherine in Westminster, thank you. Well, while the eyes of the world are on London now, for the past 3 days, Edinburgh was at the centre of all the attention. The Queen's coffin first coming to Holyrood Palace and then lying in rest at St Giles. The capital is being praised for the way it handled the last few days, and now the clean-up operation is underway. Well, Kellyanne is out in Edinburgh for us tonight, and Kellyanne, the city is returning to normal.
It is indeed, John. In fact, so much so you can probably hear the usual piper in the background. But it does feel surreal to be standing here and thinking that just over 24 hours ago, thousands of people were here and all the way down the Royal Mile as they bid farewell to Queen Elizabeth as she left Scotland for the very last time. Tens of thousands of people queued for hours to walk through those doors and file past the Queen's coffin. And this was all done in the full glare of the world's media. Well, shortly after the monarch's coffin left Scotland for the final time, a major clean-up operation got underway. And our reporter Laura Alderman has spent the day talking to locals and other people who were key in making this monumental occasion such a seamless operation.
On the Royal Mile this morning, only a few remnants hint at the historic events which happened here over the last few days. Gone are the crowds who packed into the capital to pay their final respects to the late Queen. But the eyes of the world were watching and took note.
Everything was so organised. I thought the police did a great job on all the security, and it was just amazing the outpour of love for the Queen. It was so touching.
The job was wonderful. Oh my God. No, powerful. They done well.
Of course, for tourists like us that we could not get to see, but for the sake of the Queen, we all paid respects for it.
It's a warm feeling about Edinburgh and the people. So.
Absolutely. Although St Giles Cathedral remains closed today, people are still coming here. Tourists coming to take pictures. And in the short time that we've been here this morning, many people have asked me if this was indeed where the Queen lay at rest. Many disappointed that they're too late to see her.
As Edinburgh took centre stage, a sense of pride swirled in some locals.
I thought it was fantastic.
I thought it was good, obviously, because if the Queen passed in England, we wouldn't have seen that. So it was good that we were able to pay the respect.
I thought she got a brilliant reception in Scotland, which I was quite amazed by, to be honest. But it was nice to see.
It's quite nice to come up and actually live it. Our parents, I know, are very jealous.
Volunteers in the capital mobilised en masse to support the 33,000 people who queued up to file past the Queen's coffin.
Although we've been involved in the planning for 6 years as part of Operation Unicorn, when it's actually activated, it was all hands on deck. It was an amazing experience.
It's a once in a lifetime opportunity, I think, and Volunteer Edinburgh they're very organised.
Edinburgh's new Lord Provost says he could not be more proud of his city.
I'm still processing the emotions because there's some very strong emotions. Oh, sorry, excuse me. I think I was the first person to greet the new King Charles III and welcome him to Scotland. So I was at the back of the convoy as we went down the Royal Mile, with the crowds thronging both sides, cheering, and the affection and the respect. It must have brought a lump to his throat. It certainly brought a lump to mine.
As the Queen left Scotland for the final time, staff from Edinburgh Airport were integral to the send-off.
We parked the position C-17 in for readiness for obviously the coffin's arrival. It was an emotional scene, honoured to be part of that, but as well as being proud within the team and people that came together to allow that to happen as well.
Although focus is now firmly on events in London, Scotland's capital shone bright. Her Majesty's beloved Holyrood Palace and Royal Mile, already steeped in history, now has a brand new chapter. Laura Alderman, STV News, Edinburgh.
Well, many have commented that Edinburgh has set the tone for the days ahead. Well, I'm delighted to say that one of the monarch's representatives in Scotland now joins us, Lord Lieutenant Stephen Leckie. Thanks for joining us, Stephen. Edinburgh, how do you think Edinburgh has come across?
Edinburgh has been given this sad opportunity to appear on the world stage, and it has risen to this hugely, impressively well. The organisation has gone incredibly well. The weather has been kind to us. It's been so warming to see so many people appear out to show their respects in a dignified manner at this most amazing location in St Giles in Edinburgh.
And do you think perhaps enhanced Scotland as a whole?
Well, the trip from up north, from the castle, Balmoral, through Ballater, Dundee, down through Perth, past Perth into Edinburgh, the streets and villages, towns were lined with well-wishers paying their respects to, they regard as a member of their family for over 70 years.
You knew the Queen. Your memories, what was she like?
Piercing, deep blue eyes, a delight and pleasure to spend time with. Inquisitive, fun, stories, interested. She'd ask questions about you. It was never about the royal family, it's always about you. She was there for a reason. She was well versed in uniforms and outfits and correct procedure and protocol, real decorum about everything that she stood for.
And Stephen, I know you're going to the state funeral on Monday, but can you just tell us briefly, how was the service here at St Giles?
Well, again, very well organised. Most of us arrived about an hour and a half before the service started. That gave us a chance in silence to consider the life of the Queen and consider the event that we're all so privileged to be a part of. And so that hour and a half went by very quickly, and the 20 minutes before the procession, the royal party arrived, the organ started playing, the choir were singing. It was the most amazing, moving experience.
All right, well, look, Lord Lieutenant, thank you very much for sharing those memories with us. Well, this week has seen the biggest royal occasions in Scotland in living memory. Before that, the biggest royal crowds were at the opening of the Scottish Parliament back in 1999. Well, our political editor Colin Mackay was there, and ever since he's been examining the special relationship the Queen had with the Scottish Parliament.
When the Queen officially opened the Scottish Parliament on the 1st of July 1999, it was the biggest royal ceremony Scotland had seen in years, although it's since been surpassed by what we've seen in the last few days.
The grit, determination and humour, the forthrightness, and above all, the strong sense of identity of the Scottish people. Qualities which contribute so much to the life of the United Kingdom. And these qualities reflect a Scotland which, if I may make a personal point, occupies such a special place in my own and my family's affections.
Your Majesty, we are proud that you are here today to hansel this Parliament and here with us as we dedicate ourselves to the work that lies ahead.
To mark the opening, the Queen gifted a mace to the Scottish Parliament.
Let it serve to remind all of the lawful authority vested in the Scottish Parliament from today.
It is still used every time the full Parliament meets. Engraved on it are the words wisdom, justice, compassion and integrity, words used often in the last few days to describe the Queen herself. The Queen has been a regular visitor and in the early days a keen supporter of the Scottish Parliament when its future was by no means certain.
She basically said, look, you're in this for the long term. You stick with it, represent your people, do your job. And the Parliament will become the settled will. And she was right in doing that. And it was a really, I think, helpful signal at that time that she understood matters for the long term and that we should take the same approach.
In 2019, the Parliament celebrated 20 years with young people born on the same day in 1999 and, of course, the Queen.
It has been with great pleasure that over the years I have watched Scotland grow and prosper, and have been with you at each stage of your parliamentary life.
Meeting the Queen and Prince Charles is just really weird.
Seeing the Queen actually sit and appreciate everything that was happening as well, it was really nice to be a part of.
Last year the Queen opened the current session of the Scottish Parliament. It was a more sombre affair. The country was still in the COVID crisis which cost thousands of lives. The Queen herself still mourning the death of the Duke of Edinburgh, and she seemed more frail and seemed to be passing the torch to her son.
The Duke and Duchess of Rothesay and I will continue to follow your progress with the closest of interest, and we extend to you all our warmest good wishes as you embark on this 6th session of Parliament.
On Monday, King Charles picked up that torch and took inspiration from his mother's service.
I take up my new duties with thankfulness for all that Scotland has given me, with resolve to seek always the welfare of our country and its people, and with wholehearted trust in your goodwill and good counsel as we take forward that task together.
Donald Dewar described the opening of the Scottish Parliament in 1999 as a new song for Scotland. The death of the Queen and the accession of King Charles signals the start of another new song, not just for Scotland. Colin Mackay, STV News.
Today's other news now, and businesses are urging the UK government to give more details about plans to help them with rising bills, as some firms say they're on their knees. Inflation dropped to below 10% last month, largely down to lower fuel costs, but food prices have soared. Here's our political correspondent, Ewan Petrie.
Rising food prices are piling pressure on this pizza business. The falling cost of petrol and diesel helped push the overall rate of inflation down last month for the first time in almost a year. But the cost of milk, cheese and eggs have all gone up.
The issue then becomes whether or not your product is affordable enough for people to consume. And I feel uncomfortable with increasing the prices from what they are just now.
They've already reduced lighting here to cut energy bills and only turn the ovens on when needed. The UK government has promised to backdate support for businesses like this, amid concern its scheme could be delayed.
Quite frankly, they're about 7 months too late to take action. A lot of small businesses are already on their knees. A lot of owners like myself have sacrificed everything just to keep the door open.
Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister's plans announced last week also included limiting energy costs for households.
It means that from the 1st of October, a typical household will pay no more than £2,500 per year for each of the next 2 years while we get the energy market back on track.
Shona is trying to cut back on her bills. boiling only what she needs and switching lights off when she can. She believes the UK government's plans do not go far enough.
I think the sentiment of capping the energy bills is great, but I'm still actually paying twice as much as I was a year ago, which is a ridiculous situation to be in, and I was barely making ends meet then. So something massive still needs to be done.
These pensioners are picking up the basics of new technology, but they're also looking to learn more about how their energy bills will look this winter.
There's no facts and figures that you can actually work out, and people already are in debt with the gas, the electricity.
I like the heating on at all times, and I do know it will make a big difference to us. You know, it's not just a couple of pounds here and there, it's got into the hundreds.
The government is expected to set out more details of its plans to tackle the cost of living crisis later next week. Ewan Petrie, STV News.
Other stories across Scotland, and the former husband of Rennie McRae, who vanished with her 3-year-old son 45 years ago, has told the High Court in Inverness he played no part in their deaths. Gordon McRae has been giving evidence in the trial of William McDowell, who's accused of murdering Rennie and Andrew McRae in November 1976. William McDowell denies the charges. The case continues. An investigation into an explosion at a house in South Ayrshire, which left a family of 4 in hospital, has found the blast was caused by a corroded gas pipe. Dozens of properties were damaged and one was completely destroyed in Kincaidston last year. The Health and Safety Executive say no further action will be taken. Workers at Scotland's exams body have suspended strike action following a new pay offer. Industrial action was due to begin at the SQA at the end of this week, as well as 6 dates in late September and early October. A Scottish MP who travelled between London and Scotland breaching COVID rules in 2020 will carry out 270 hours of community service. Last month, Margaret Ferrier admitted to recklessly exposing the public to the risk of COVID-19 after testing positive for the virus herself and then travelling on a train. She remains an independent MP representing Rutherglen and Hamilton West. Courtney Cameron reports.
It's an enormous privilege and deep honour to be elected.
Margaret Ferrier was first elected to the House of Commons in 2015. Taking on the role meant she was involved in overseeing the laws of the land. But during the first COVID lockdown, the Rutherglen and Hamilton West MP broke the very rules she's meant to uphold. Last month, she admitted to breaking COVID regulations, and this week she learned what her punishment would be.
For whatever reason you chose to ignore the guidance that many in the United Kingdom followed, the public rightly expect that those elected to represent them set an example. The order which I am imposing will comprise an unpaid work or other activity requirement of 270 hours.
It's been 2 years since Margaret Ferrier broke COVID rules, and it's something that's been hanging over her and the constituency ever since. Despite her sentencing, she doesn't need to resign or stand down, meaning it could be another 2 years before the local people here have their say.
I think if I was her, I would resign myself.
Because if she doesn't know the rules, well, nobody will know the rules.
She lied. Despite being suspended by the SNP, Ferrier can remain as an MP until the next election.
There's no obligation for an MP to resign unless they are convicted of a crime with a sentence of more than a year in prison, where it's automatic that they're removed from Parliament. So the other time she could have resigned is if she has been suspended from the House of Commons for more than 10 days.
While the case is now closed for Margaret Ferrier, the judgment of voters in her area remains to be seen. Courtney Cameron, STV News, Rutherglen.
And finally, some pupils in Edinburgh receive what's thought to be one of the last letters sent by the Queen.
Remarkably, the special piece of mail arrived last Thursday, the same day Queen Elizabeth passed away peacefully at Balmoral. Paula Bartlett has been speaking to the youngsters.
To the students at Pentland Primary School, the Queen wishes me to write and thank you for the splendid letters which you sent to Her Majesty
An extra special message from the Queen for these children at a primary school in Edinburgh.
I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited, literally. Oh my God, I was like, oh, that's so nice.
It was honestly a wee bit weird because I thought we were like imaginary writing to the Queen, but then my teacher said, okay, I'm going to go send this to the Queen, and I was quite worried because my writing's awful.
I was like, this can't be happening. It's just so amazing to get a letter back from the Queen.
It makes me feel just like really grateful and appreciative that she took the time out of her life to just send that to us.
The Royal Mail arrived last Thursday, a thank you note for well wishes the children had sent during Jubilee celebrations earlier this year.
When we had the celebrations, we really hoped that the children would, have an interest in the Queen and the royal family, and they had that much more than we imagined they would. So they decided that they would like to write to the Queen, and I kind of feel that they felt really grateful for the work that she'd done. They seemed to appreciate it.
I think it develops a connection to the royal family, and especially with the timing of the letter, it's turned what is a sad day of mourning for everybody, for the whole world really, into this special connection they now have with it. So they've got a really happy memory linked to what also would be a sad one.
A memory and a memento to treasure forever. Polly Bartlett, STV News, Edinburgh.
Indeed, a cherished memory for those children there. And for the thousands of people tonight in London, the chance to pay their respects begins.
As mourners begin to file through Westminster Hall to pay their respects. From our teams in Glasgow and here in Edinburgh, it's good nights.